George Russell's Monaco race was not destroyed by a wall. It was destroyed by a number so small, most fans would never even notice it. A pit lane reading. A fraction over the limit. A penalty. Then a second punishment. And suddenly, Russell's race collapsed from a points fight into a disaster that left him saying he was beyond frustration. But here is the part that makes this bigger than Russell. He said he pressed the limiter before the entry line. He said he released it after the exit. Mercedes told him he had done nothing wrong. And yet, the penalty still came. Then Lewis Hamilton was caught. Pierre Gasly was caught. Multiple drivers, from multiple teams, were caught by the same kind of tiny margins. So now Formula One has a dangerous question to answer. Were the drivers really speeding? Or did Monaco expose a pit lane system that can punish a driver even when he follows the rules? Because if Russell is right, this was not just a bad race. It was a broken measurement turning into a championship-damaging sanction. And once that happens, every driver on the grid has a reason to be furious. Subscribe to the channel. Monaco is the kind of race that makes Formula One look glamorous from the outside, and merciless from the inside. The world sees the harbor, the yachts, the balconies, the cameras, the history. The driver sees walls. Not distant walls. Not forgiving walls. Walls close enough to punish one late reaction, one missed braking point, one moment of doubt. At Monaco, the car never really gets room to breathe. The driver is always turning, braking, correcting, listening, calculating, and trusting that every inch of space will still be there when he arrives. That is why mistakes at Monaco feel different. At another circuit, a driver might run wide and recover. At Monaco, he hit something. At another circuit, a 5-second penalty might be painful. At Monaco, it can bury the entire race. Because overtaking is almost impossible. Track position becomes everything. A slower car can hold up a faster one for lap after lap, not because it has more pace, but because the circuit gives almost no chance to pass. Once a driver falls into traffic, he may never escape. And that is why George Russell needed Monaco to be clean. He arrived with pressure already building around him. His Mercedes teammate, Kimi Antonelli, had become the story of the season, winning race after race and pulling away in the championship. Russell was still third in the standings, still respected, still fast, but the gap was growing, and every missed opportunity made the fight feel heavier. Then came the memory of Canada. A battery failure had already taken points from him. The frustration from that weekend had spilled over badly enough that the governing body looked into his behavior after he threw his headrest from the car. He apologized. He admitted embarrassment. But the damage was done, not just in the standings, but in the emotional weight he carried into the next race. So Monaco was not just another Grand Prix. It was a chance to reset. A chance to stop the slide. A chance to leave behind the chaos, score properly, and remind everyone that the championship fight had not already become Antonelli's private story. But Monaco does not care what a driver needs. It only cares what a driver survives. Russell qualified 6th, which at Monaco is a difficult place to start, but not a hopeless one. From the third row, strategy still matters. Safety cars can change the race. A perfectly timed stop can pull a driver forward. A mistake from a rival can open a door that would normally stay locked. He was not in control of the race. But he was still in it. And then the pit lane turned against him. That is what makes this story so strange. The pit lane is supposed to be the controlled part of Formula One. The racetrack is chaos. The pit lane is procedure. There are lines, speed limits, timing loops, team signals, and strict rules. The driver enters, activates the limiter, stays under the allowed speed, stops if needed, then exits only when it is safe. In theory, it is one of the clearest parts of the sport. But at Monaco, theory became dangerous. The pit lane speed limit was 60 km per hour. Lower than many other venues, because Monaco's pit lane is narrow, crowded, and unforgiving. Mechanics stand close to the cars. Officials are nearby. Equipment is packed into tight spaces. One car arriving too fast could create real danger. So the rule makes sense. Nobody is seriously arguing against the need for a limit. The problem is what happened when the limit was measured. Because Russell said he did what he was supposed to do. He said he pressed the pit limiter before the entry line. He said he released it after the exit. Mercedes told him there was nothing he had done wrong in the pit lane. Those details are important. Because if a driver forgets the limiter, the argument ends quickly. If he activates it late, the penalty is obvious. If he gains speed through the lane, the case is clear. But Russell's claim was different. He believed the process was correct. The team believed the driver had not made an obvious mistake. And still, the system produced a penalty. That is where doubt entered the story. And doubt, at this level, spreads quickly. Because Russell was not the only one caught. Lewis Hamilton was penalized. Pierre Gasly was hit. Other drivers and teams were also drawn into the same pit lane mess. The problem did not look like one careless driver making one isolated mistake. It looked like a pattern. And patterns are what terrify Formula One teams. One mistake can be explained. A pattern has to be investigated. This pattern had already shown itself before the race. During the first practice session, Russell had been recorded at 60.3 km/h in the pit lane, only slightly above the limit, and Mercedes received a small fine. Other teams were also caught during practice, including fines or suspended fines linked to pit lane breaches. That should have sounded like an alarm. Not just to the drivers. To the whole sport. Because when the same kind of issue appears across multiple teams before the race even begins, the question is not only, why are drivers getting it wrong? The deeper question is, why is this place creating the same kind of problem again and again? Monaco's pit lane is not normal. It never has been. But in 2026, it had another complication. The addition of Cadillac meant an extra pit box, adding congestion to an already tight space. In a pit lane where every meter matters, changes like that can affect positioning, rhythm, entry angles, and driver expectation. And when those physical details meet a strict speed system, the margin for confusion becomes tiny. The governing body uses electronic timing loops and transponders to measure pit lane speed. That sounds precise, and in many ways, it is. But the controversy came from how that precision interacts with the driver's actual path. Drivers are permitted to cross the white line at pit entry and exit. But crossing that line can change how the timing loops calculate the car's speed. If the car takes a slightly different path through the measurement area, the reading can appear higher than what the driver believes the car is actually doing. That is why Russell and others pointed toward a software or measurement issue. And this is where the anger becomes understandable. A driver can live with losing time because he made a mistake. He can live with losing time because the car lacked pace. He can even live with losing time because a strategy call went wrong. But losing time because the system may have misunderstood his legal movement through the pit lane feels different. It feels unfair. And for Russell, the consequences were not small. The first sanction was a 5-second penalty. At Monaco, 5 seconds can destroy track position. But even then, a team can sometimes manage it. Serve it at the next stop. Build a gap. Hope a safety car reduces the damage. There are ways to survive. Russell did not survive. Because the race became confused at exactly the wrong moment. He explained that he had been told to stay out, but then the governing body directed cars through the pit lane. He was asking Mercedes whether he was stopping for tires or continuing. Then he saw his fresh set of tires waiting. Everything happened too fast. In that confusion, the mechanics did not hold the car for the required 5 seconds before beginning the stop. The original penalty was not served correctly. And that triggered the second punishment. A drive-through. At Monaco, a drive-through is brutal. The car enters the pit lane, travels through at the speed limit, and comes back out with nothing gained. No tires. No repair. No strategic benefit. Just lost time. At some circuits, a driver can attack afterward. At Monaco, he usually cannot. The circuit closes around him. The traffic becomes a prison. The cars ahead do not need to be faster, they only need to be ahead. And once Russell fell down the order, his race was basically gone. That is how a tiny pit lane reading became a race-destroying sequence. A disputed penalty. A chaotic stop. A failure to serve. A drive-through. A lost result. And in a championship where Russell was already chasing his own teammate, that mattered enormously. Because this was not simply about where he finished on one Sunday. It was about momentum. Antonelli was winning and building a lead. Hamilton was scoring strongly for Ferrari. Russell needed every possible point to stay close. Instead, Monaco became another weekend where the standings moved away from him. That is why his words after the race carried so much force. He said he was beyond frustration. Not mildly annoyed. Not disappointed. Beyond frustration. That phrase tells you the emotional state of a driver who feels the same pattern happening again and again. Bad luck, technical issues, penalty confusion, lost points, and now a Monaco race ruined by a sanction he did not believe he deserved. But the most dangerous part for the governing body was not Russell's anger. It was the fact that other drivers could understand it. Hamilton had his own penalty. Gasly lost far more emotionally. Multiple teams were involved. The paddock mood was not just, Russell had a bad day. It was, something is wrong here. And that is when a controversy becomes much harder to control. Because if the issue belongs to one driver, it fades. If it belongs to the grid, it grows. The pit lane disaster at Monaco started as a speed penalty. But by the time Russell's race collapsed, it had become a question about trust. Can drivers trust the limiter? Can teams trust the measurement? Can the sport trust a system that produces penalties across multiple teams by tiny margins? And most importantly, can Formula One keep defending the process if the people inside the cars believe the process did not capture the truth? That is the real tension behind Russell's fury. He was not just angry because he lost points. He was angry because, from his perspective, he had followed the procedure, and the procedure still punished him. And in Formula One, that is one of the most dangerous feelings a driver can have. Because the entire sport depends on drivers accepting the rules, even when the rules hurt. They accept strict boundaries. They accept penalties. They accept measurements so precise that a human eye could never judge them. But they accept all of that because they believe the system is measuring reality. Monaco challenged that belief. And once belief cracks, every future pit entry starts to feel different. A driver no longer thinks only about slowing down. He thinks about the line, the loop, the white paint, the transponder, the angle, the chance that the number on the official system may not match what the car is doing. That is not clarity. That is doubt. And doubt is exactly what Russell could not afford. But the penalty itself was only the first crack. The real collapse came when Russell tried to move through the confusion that followed. Because a 5-second penalty, on its own, can sometimes be managed. It hurts, especially at Monaco, but it does not always destroy the race. A team can serve it during a pit stop. A driver can try to build a gap. A safety car can soften the damage. Strategy can still rescue the afternoon. But Russell's race did not give Mercedes that clean sequence. It gave them chaos. And chaos at Monaco is never neutral. It always chooses a victim. Russell had already been hit with the pit lane speeding penalty, a sanction he did not understand and did not believe came from something he had done wrong. He was still processing that when the race situation shifted again. The instructions were moving quickly. The team communication was changing. The pit lane became part of a wider race management mess. Russell explained that he had first been told to stay out on track.